Hello, everyone, and welcome to our third Carers Info session. We're coming to you live from the lovely sunny Port Macquarie this month, and today we've got voices. We've got sound coming from somewhere else. So today we have Jemah, our Family Liaison Officer, speaking to us about navigating the system. So a little bit about our carers info session. I should actually introduce myself. Hi, I'm Megan, and I am the co-project lead for our carers project. And this part of our project is our information session. So how these came about is we asked carers what they wanted to hear about. So through the funding that we got from NDIS, through their information linkages and capacity building funding, which is a great additional piece of funding that comes through NDIS, not just our individualised packages, we were lucky enough to get a grant to support carers. So the information sessions have come together based on what carers have said they wanted. And so we're lucky today to have a carer who's also been navigating the NDIS system within her work role to be able to come and speak with us today. We also have the other part of our project that is our Family Liaison Officer role, which Jemah is in. And so she is our first Family Liaison Officer here on the mid-north coast of New South Wales, and she meets people within the hospital and helps them transition after brain injury. And we will be having more Family Liaison Officers around the state coming up really soon. So that's going to be an exciting development. But I think for now, I'm going to let Jemah get started to share with you, a bit about navigating NDIS and the other systems that you end up having to navigate when you're thrown into this world of brain injury and the disability and support sector. So over to Jemah.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's Carers Information session on navigating the system. My name is Jemah and I'm the first Family Liaison Officer here on the Mid-North Coast. I'm really passionate about my role as I've been a carer for my mum for the past 12 years. She sustained a traumatic brain injury in a high-speed motor vehicle accident. I do hope today's session will offer some clarity for everybody and answer some questions that we all might have about the systems that we're required to use. Today's info session will focus on NDIS and touch base on ICare, Lifetime Care and Support, My Aged Care and Centrelink, and how it will directly affect us as carers and how we can support our loved ones. As a general rule, the person that we are caring for will be a part of one of these systems at least. Whilst we are busy being experts on caring for our loved ones, we are bumbling along learning as we go about the systems in place that we've found ourselves a huge part of. ICare is the New South Wales insurance system for individuals who've had an accident on our roads or sustained a workplace injury. It's a similar system to NDIS, but it's governed a little separately by separate bodies. Generally, it is conducted with a case manager. Supports are monitored through similar setups, and the individual's income is managed by a separate organisation to ensure that their funds are used adequately and appropriately to care for the needs of our loved ones in these circumstances. I'm not going to go into depth with ICare today, but if ICare applies to someone you care for, you are generally joined automatically to the scheme as a process post-injury. If at any stage you need assistance with your ICare process, please speak to your contact person at Synapse. We can assist to guide you through questions, forms, support services, things like that. If there is something we don't know, we are fortunate that we have the resources and the services to find the answers and put you on the right track. My Aged Care. Brain injury or not, the My Aged Care system is something that we all need to be familiar with in the future with ageing relatives and friends. I've just stepped through the process up here on our slides, stating that if you're over 65 or over 50 if you're Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander, you are eligible for My Aged Care access. I suggest that when our loved ones are eligible to access the services of My Aged Care, that you apply, regardless of whether you feel they need the supports to live independently at this time. In some areas, I know on the North Coast, there is a 12+ month wait list on what is considered non-urgent care applications. As we are all aware, there is no predicting what is around the corner, so it is better to have the process started and be on the wait list. If your assessment turn arrives and your loved one's care needs are still relatively low, the assessment can take place and the process can still be undertaken. In a similar startup process to NDIS, you call to register your interest in applying for My Aged Care with your Medicare card details. Similar to the NDIS, when we call up, we need to make sure our loved one is available if possible. You can give consent for somebody else to speak on your behalf, similar to the NDIS. You're required to undergo a My Aged Care assessment, which takes time depending on the deemed urgency of your care needs. We don't get to choose the urgency level, that's given to us. Once deemed eligible, you are given a ranking system as to your care needs and allocated a package to access services appropriate to supporting independent living. You can have this ranking reassessed at a later stage if your care needs change. It will mean that they'll be assessed with lower care needs at this time, but they will already be in the system should their care needs change at a later date. It is a much more timely process to adjust their care needs level than it is to start the process fresh when it is needed. Your eligibility for the NDIS. You are eligible for the NDIS if you have a permanent disability that significantly affects your ability to take part in everyday activities or a developmental delay. This impairment or condition must be deemed permanent and inhibit your ability to carry out daily activities by yourself. This becomes a bit of a challenge when you're in hospital, you're still in the hospital system, they don't deem that you're actually stable enough, and so other services need to be put in place to assist for that process to take place. You need to be aged less than 65 when you first enter the NDIS. If you're over 65, you'll be referred to the My Aged Care process. You need to be an Australian citizen or hold a permanent visa or a protected special category visa and live in Australia where the NDIS is available. If you qualify for each of these categories, you're entitled to apply for the NDIS. The NDIA determines individual eligibility for the NDIS. People get a little confused between the NDIA and the NDIS. The NDIA is the agency or government body that governs the NDIS. The NDIS in many areas is given out to other organisations to help deliver the NDIA services. Some people, including people living in the supported accommodation, accessing a community, access services such as day programs, specialist disability case management, or accessing a respite service will go through a simplified eligibility process based on the supports they currently receive. When you call to make initial access contact with the NDIS, they will ask you a number of questions. If you need help with this phone call, it is handy to have a support person nearby. We as carers can be that support person and help our loved one through this process. We do need their identification, such as Medicare number and Centrelink reference number if they have one. If your loved one cannot speak or speak clearly, have them listen into the call so that you can identify to the access person on the end of the phone that they are non-verbal or have speech and communication problems as a result of their brain injury. They are familiar with this process, so please don't be afraid to speak up. Take your time gathering the relevant evidence to support your application. They request that you have the form back within 28 days, but in our area, for example, getting in to see your regular GP can take a lot longer than this allocated time. It's only a guideline of time to return, not a hard time frame. Just do your best, as quality of evidence to support the application is more important than returning it on time. One of the most frequently asked questions, what makes up good, relevant evidence to submit with the documents for your NDIS application? The more recent the document, the more relevant it is. That does not remove the importance of vital reports completed by specialists at the time our loved one has sustained their injury, but if we can add more recent reports to it, it's highly beneficial. Generally, if you've been in hospital as a result of your injury, you can obtain reports such as ones from our occupational therapists, neuropsych reports, speech therapists, reports from rehab specialists, the local brain injury rehab service, if you have one in your local area, a neurologist report. And then some of the other ones that we've found that are quite helpful include something called a CANS, a Care and Needs scale, and the Summer Foundation Community Integration Questionnaire. The more evidence, the better for the person reading your application and making the decision on whether or not you are successful. This is probably a little bit hard to see on the screen, but you have access to the slides. This is a one-page care and needs scale document which summarises the basic care needs of the person that we care for. It can be completed by someone who treats or consults your loved one. It can be completed with your input as carers, as we often know what is best for our capable or incapable, we often know what is best or how capable or incapable our loved one is with certain things. As is always the case, please, please, please provide the worst case scenario. We know with a brain injury, people have good and bad days, but there's no point in hoping for the best and giving this scenario over. Brain injuries are not consistent from 1 hour to the next or 1 day to the next, so we must provide the worst case scenario. Our care and needs scale goes through all of our activities of daily living, what they are capable of doing themselves, what they need assistance with, and what they're completely incapable of achieving. We need to be realistic so that we can set them up for best case scenario. If the person we care for needs assistance from time to time with dressing or showering independently, based on fatigue levels, balance from being exhausted or fatigued, etc., always give the worst case. Now isn't the time to be optimistic. This care and needs scale is best addressed and documented with the next one, which is a community integration questionnaire. Again, it's difficult for you to see. This is just an example of some of the questions, but the community integration questionnaire goes on how the individual interacts with society on a social level, how they're able to access the community, and what ways they go about it. Things like social media is often considered these days as an important and relevant social tool. However, we need to consider with a brain injury the availability for them to be able to access and understand it independently. It looks at the community integration questionnaire, looks at the social and emotional aspects of accessing the community and how our loved ones respond to these areas. It is another way of looking at deficits of the brain injury and how it impacts on their lives. Just because they can dress themselves doesn't mean that they can interact with others, communicate, or socialise and respond to emotions. This questionnaire combines together with the CAN scale to give a great overall picture of the new version of our loved one post-brain injury. What happens if I'm rejected from an NDIS application? It's really hard to take if your loved one is rejected, but it doesn't mean the end. You have 3 months from receiving your letter of decline to request an internal review. The person who reviews that is not the same person that makes the decision initially. If you feel you're entitled to receive NDIS, you have 3 months from being declined to request it. An internal review is a process that the National Disability Insurance Agency will complete if you tell them that you aren't happy with the decision that they've made. They will look at your request and decide if a different decision should be made or not. The person who looks at your request won't be the same person who made the first decision. They'll either make a new decision or confirm the original. It might take a while for this review to be considered. When a new decision is made, you will receive a letter. It will tell you if it's been changed or if it will stay the same. If the decision is staying the same and you're not happy, you can seek a further review with the Administrative Appeals Tribunal. On a positive, when you're approved for NDIS, where to start? This is about where, as a Family Liaison Officer, we celebrate. It's a huge achievement that should be celebrated because it means you've jumped through all the hoops and kicked a few more goals and onwards and upwards to having some more control and say over the direction of the care needs of our loved ones. In turn, this will be a step closer to not just survival mode, but actually a quality of life where we can look at achieving these goals as a team. Some of the things we need to look at is what our current supports are, if we're self-managed or plan managed. We should possibly be able to continue with what we've got, plus add a few more in. Where to start looking for additional support? What are reasonable and necessary supports? Reasonable and necessary supports is a terminology that NDIS use all of the time. They mean supports that assist you to pursue your goals, aspirations, and independence. They allow you to take part in social activities and work in the community. They help to support you in being able to enjoy what is deemed an ordinary or back to the normal life. What we feel are reasonable and necessary are not always what the funding systems agree with. I always try and remind people that reasonable and necessary follows along the lines of what you need to return to what you were doing before to allow you to function in a similar way to what you did pre-injury. NDIS won't buy you a new car or send you on a round-the-world holiday. It will, however, help to assist with necessary modifications to enable you to drive a vehicle, for example, that you were previously driving, or help to fund a support worker for you to take short-term accommodation or holiday somewhat independently. Similarly, they will provide funding for services for meal preparation or pre-prepared meal services, but it's not the NDIS's responsibility to fund the food products that go into the meals, as pre-injury, you needed to fund your food each week and now is no different. Reasonable and necessary supports need to be related to your disability. They need to represent value for money. They're likely to be effective and work for you, and they take into account informal support such as friends, family, and carers. They also take into account formal support such as health, therapies, and education services. Preparing for a new plan. Have you seen our pre-planning book? Synapse has a really detailed pre-planning book that is a helpful tool for us to help as carers to prepare for a new plan. Whether it's your first plan or a plan review, it's really quite an assistive tool. Synapse have an easy-to-follow step-by-step guide to pre-planning for your NDIS plan. It sets out what supports you currently use, your goals, how you plan to go about achieving them, what worked for you and your loved ones, and what didn't in the existing plan. It's a wonderful tool to work through and take to your planning meeting. If you'd like to get your hands on one, ask your Synapse contact person, and we can assist you to complete it also. Goal setting when it comes to your NDIS plan. Goal setting used to be just something included in the first few plans, and now they've changed the structure. Not only do you need to set goals, but you also need to demonstrate how you're going to work towards them. Oftentimes we get asked, where do the goals come from? The goals come from the individual. If they're incapable of coming up with them independently, then that's our role as carers to help support them to achieve realistic goals. They need to be set so that they are achievable. The importance of goal setting for an NDIS plan. The whole idea of NDIS is that we're meant to be building upon our independence. How do I prepare to build my plan around my goals? Good question. When you go to a planning meeting now for your next plan, goals have become an even bigger focus. Not only do we need to state them, the planner needs to document how they're going to be achieved. This is to ensure that the plan is tailored to support the goals of the participants. What works and what doesn't when it comes to goals? You need to start thinking about what goals are important to you. Sometimes we need to assist our loved ones to set these goals. We need to look at what steps and supports will be required in trying to achieve each of these goals. We need to consider the supports that we have in place now. Some of the questions that we need to think about are they working for us? If not, how do they need to change? What other supports would assist? Some of the things we need to think about also are the additional supports, what we might need to get through the next 12 months of the plan. It doesn't need to be the first plan, any plan. We need to plan what's ahead of us. It's important to remember that each of these goals need to be achievable. In the initial few plans post-injury, the focus might be on individual health, activities of daily living, and therapies to achieve a return to independence, or as near to as possible. As time goes on, goals might be more along the lines of accessing the community, increasing social interaction, maintaining health and well-being, study, or potentially employment. If possible, talk to our loved ones that we care for about what they might want to achieve in the next 12 months. We need to try and make them achievable and reasonable goals, as the last thing we want to do as carers is set the goals too high and not make them achievable. We need to start thinking about what goals are important to the people we care about, plus what steps and supports we're required. If you choose to have the plan managed or self-managed, you might be able to bring a friend or a person that takes your loved ones on their activity or interests or to appointments. They might be able to keep doing that and be paid through the individual's NDIS plan. If they're not working for us, we need to look at what we want to make them work. Do we get enough support hours, enough domestic assistance, enough therapies to achieve our goals? Would you like more or less, or is time and money spent better in other areas? Also think about the additional supports you may need to get you through the 12 months or your first and upcoming NDIS plan. If you're looking at having surgery in the next 12 months, it may require you to need some additional supports in place, or if there's anything else that you can plan for in the upcoming period. Again, I know I keep going on about it, but the most important thing is that we need to make these plans based around how your individual loved one will feel on their worst day, not necessarily when everything's going to plan. Plan management. Plan management is something that we are frequently asked about, and there are 3 different plan management options. NDIA manage. This is where the agency or the government NDIS body itself manages your funds. Invoices and claims are submitted directly to NDIA for payment. Originally, when people were first receiving their plan, the NDIA was pretty much the go-to. People were generally overwhelmed by the process, so it was the default. The issue for participants and their carers is that you're restricted with where you can get your supports from, as they need to be an NDIS registered provider. To gain this registration, you need to meet stringent criteria and now costly auditing processes by the NDIA to gain that registration. This will limit your options for support. You can't just use someone with an ABN or a service that has been delivering cleaning or lawn mowing for you unless they are NDIS registered. The second option is to go with a plan managed service. This is when you use a plan management company to manage your bill paying and invoices for your plan. This offers a good level of flexibility whilst also leaving the responsibility of paying invoices on time to somebody else. Your supports don't need to be an NDIS registered provider, so you have greater levels of flexibility when it comes to obtaining the right supports for you. It's so important to make sure, like any service you use, that your plan management company is reputable and a good payer. In my experience, I have experienced service providers ceasing trade with some participants because their invoices are taking too long to be paid. As much as we all go to work to provide a service and to genuinely make a difference, we all have bills that we need to pay with our income, and we wouldn't like not to be paid. If you aren't aware of a good plan manager in your area, ask around your network. Ask at your carers group, ask at Reconnections for recommendations. Your plan manager doesn't need to be local. They can be located anywhere as long as you can reach them when you want to by phone call or email. What is important is that they offer a level of service that you're paying them for. They need to be good communicators, and they need to respond and pay in a reasonable time frame. Don't be afraid to ask around your network, our Facebook support groups, etc., for a plan manager recommendation. The third option when it comes to plan management is to self-manage. Self-manage is definitely the most flexible option. However, I would recommend it cautiously as a carer. In my experience, I have enough on my plate caring for my loved one and my own family and working and everything else that I need to do. I strongly believe in self-preservation, and as capable as I like to think I am, it's so important to prioritise. And as a carer, I often ask myself, is this something I can delegate? Is my energy best off being used for something else? For me, the answer is yes and yes. But there are some people we work with that are self-managed and they do a remarkable job. It needs to work for you and the person that you care for. When you are self-managed, you can use anyone as long as they have an ABN and the relevant insurances to provide those supports. Plan management is paid as part of your NDIS plan if you request it. Don't forget to ask for it if you and your loved one agree that that's the way that you would like to go. It doesn't come out of the same budget as your supports, so don't think that by declining it that it will save money for therapies or support work or domestic or things like that. It doesn't work like that. It is added in separately if you require and if you ask for it. NDIS registered providers. We're often asked, can we use an organisation that is not an NDIS registered provider? Again, this depends on whether you are NDIA managed, self-managed or plan managed, as we went through. Self-managed or plan managed, just to clarify, you can use providers of supports and services that are not registered NDIS providers. However, if you're NDIA managed, you must only use NDIS registered providers to deliver your supports and services. In our area, it greatly restricts who can provide your services, as people often don't want to go through the costly process of auditing and meeting the stringent requirements to be an NDIS registered provider. Support coordination. It's an interesting concept. We haven't worked out yet how they actually qualify at NDIA, what you need to do or how you need to meet the criteria for support coordination. We like to work on the concept that if they deem that you don't have an eligible support person to manage those supports, then you technically should be eligible for support coordination. It's not a blanket rule though. We haven't worked out the fail-safe option yet. Support coordination is an NDIS funded support that is designed to support participants to make the most of their NDIS funds. Once a plan has been approved, participants work with the support coordinators to determine how their funds will be spent and connect with providers. At its best, support coordination is all about facilitating expansive conversations about what is possible with a person's NDIS funds or maximising their funds. Building our loved one's capacity to have some choice and control over their life. It's all about supporting participants to navigate the NDIS network and find providers who understand their disability and how to make the most of it. Support coordination in NDIS plans is a little bit hit and miss. When we seem to be on top of how it is calculated as to whether or not people qualify, the goalposts seem to change. As a general rule, people impacted by brain injury benefit greatly from having someone to coordinate their supports and at minimum help them to find and initiate new supports where required. I see them as a recruitment agency for you as much as anything. It's important that your support coordinator knows you well, knows what works for you, knows your plan, what you're like as a person, and what is important to you. They also need to know about brain injury and how you are impacted by it. If you are slow to start in the morning, for example, if you're fatigued by afternoons, if your short-term memory isn't the greatest or more easily confused at times, or you have trouble comprehending documents, they need to know you. I feel like this is something that isn't negotiable when it comes to support coordination, but it's extremely undervalued. The support coordinator is there to help you or your loved one to maximize the plan and make it work for you by helping you find and implement the best supports for you. Support coordination will assist you to build the skills you need to understand, implement, and use in your plan. A support coordinator will work with you to ensure you have a mix of some supports to increase your capacity to maintain relationships, manage service delivery tasks, live more independently, and be included in your community. A support coordinator will support you to understand and implement the funded supports in your plan and link you to community, mainstream, and other government services. They also need to know your network area really well. A support coordinator will focus on supporting you to build skills and direct your life, as well as connect you to providers. They'll also help you to negotiate with providers about what they will offer you and how much it will cost out of your plan. They'll also ensure that your service agreements and service bookings are completed. They help you build your ability to exercise choice and control and to coordinate the supports and access your local community. They can also assist you in planning ahead to prepare for your next plan review. I'm only going to touch base briefly on My Place and navigating My Place, which is the individual participants' online NDIS portal, how they can access the live view of their plan. You can see your plan, what's been spent, and what's remaining on it. It gives you some control over your NDIS plan in a timely manner. You are provided with a login unique to yourself or your loved one if you're recognised as an authorised nominee, which I'll go into later. If you need some assistance navigating your way around the My Place portal, ask a Synapse contact to help step you through it. I've had some questions along the line about what the different types of nominees are when it comes to, particularly for carers, when it comes to setting up the person that we care for NDIS system. And there are two types of NDIS nominees, a plan nominee and a correspondence nominee. They're generally appointed by the individual participant. A plan nominee is usually able to do anything or to act that may be done by a participant under or for the purposes of the preparation, review, or replacement of the participant's plan or the management of funding for supports under their plan. A correspondence nominee, however, is exactly that. They assist with the correspondence only. In contrast, the role of a correspondence nominee is much narrower. Although a correspondence nominee is able to do a range of acts on behalf of the participant, they are not able to prepare, review, or replace a plan or manage the funds within the plan. The correspondence nominee is able to do includes contacting the agency, communicating, receiving notices from the agency or on behalf of the participant. On some occasions, the NDIA may appoint a nominee if the individual is deemed incapable of doing so. As a general rule, the individual is encouraged to actively participate in the decision-making around their NDIS plan if possible. Service agreements. The importance of having a service agreement in place, it becomes a binding contract. It's able to be easily communicated because it's in writing, and preferably the individual has a copy of it. Service agreements should include things like what supports and services the individual provider agrees to provide, the cost of those supports and services to the individual so that they know what they're agreeing to, how, when and where you would like your supports and services to be provided, how long you need the supports and services to be provided for, taking into account that a service agreement can't extend beyond the date of your plan, when and how your service agreement will be reviewed, how and any problems or issues that may arise will be handled, such as a grievance policy or a complaints process, your responsibilities under the service agreement, such as letting your provider know if you can't make an appointment or how much notice that you need to give, the provider's cancellation policy, your provider's responsibilities, such as working with you to deliver your supports and services in the right way, how you or your provider may change or end the service agreement. Service agreement must be also made in guidelines to meet the stringent guidelines of the NDIS also. Your provider may have their own standard service agreement that they may like to use, or you can always create one yourself. It's really important that you request a copy from your provider. It's good business practice for providers to bring 2 copies of the service agreement with them when you're going to sign it. Keep one for your own records and return the signed one to the provider. If they don't bring 2 copies, ask them to copy it and provide you with a copy so that you can look back and refer to it when you need to later on. If you're unsure about whether or not a service agreement is appropriate, again, please ask your contact to help you. NDIS lingo. I've gone through like the speed of lightning and I haven't asked if there's any questions. I guess we could stop. And is there any questions? No. NDIS use a fair amount of lingo that we often struggle to understand. The whole process of NDIS is somewhat overwhelming for anyone new to it, even for people who have had ongoing exposure to the NDIS since its implementation, find it challenging to grasp. The terminology and lingo can sometimes be a little bit too much. Just going through some of the more important ones, but I will attach the NDIS lingo document to the presentation for people to be able to refer to at a later date. NDIS stands for the National Disability Insurance Scheme. It's the government's way of providing support for Australians with disabilities, their families and their carers. Sometimes we get confused between the NDIS and the NDIA. The NDIA is the National Disability Insurance Agency. It's the Commonwealth Government organisation administering the NDIS. In many areas, the NDIS is contracted out to organisations that deliver the services of the NDIA. A participant in the NDIS is the actual person with the disability receiving the NDIS package. Some people call them, depending on the health network, their clients, their patients, their customers, but according to the NDIS, you're a participant. The provider is the organisation that we engage to provide the services or support for the participant or for our loved one. The first plan is generally the start of your relationship with the NDIS. Once you've gained access to your first plan, a review will take place in the lead up to the plan expiry. The first plan generally lasts a year. Sometimes later on, when you have your plans, if you're deemed stable and suitable, they can stretch out to 2 years. The MyPlace portal registration, connect and make service bookings with participants, and submit and monitor claims for payment. MyPlace is also for participants or their nominee to view their NDIS plan, request payments, and manage services with providers. I think one of the most important things about the MyPlace portal is that it gives the individual or their carers the lifetime access to be able to see where they're up to with their plan and how they're going with their budgeting perspective. A registered service provider are individuals or organisations that are registered with the NDIA to deliver a support or a product or service to participants in the NDIS. Early intervention is not something that everybody is relevant with. It's accelerated access into the NDIS for children under 7. NDIS contracts these services out to individual providers based on the areas. The whole idea is to access assistance at the earliest stage possible in the children's lives to be able to make improvements early. Organisations that are experienced in early childhood intervention, they work with families and children under 6 with a disability or developmental delay to decide on supports and access services appropriate. Different budgeting, this is still in the lingo, it's not in our core budgets just yet. Capacity building is about making sure that people with a disability with their families and carers help, that they can build on their skills, resources and confidence that they need to participate in the community or access the same kind of opportunities or services as other people. Community capacity building, however, is about making sure that mainstream services or community organisations become more inclusive of people with a disability. We often get asked what an LAC is in the local NDIS offices or local area coordinators. They're local organisations working in partnership with the NDIA to help participants, their families and carers access the NDIS. LACs will help gather information from participants to inform the NDIA in preparation for planning or new plans. LACs do some basic management of plans and they connect participants to mainstream services and local and community-based support. These are often different to planners who work within the NDIA to create plans with participants. We've been over what reasonable and necessary supports are because that comes up quite often. They're the supports that assist a person to pursue their goals, aspirations and independence and allow the person to take part in social activities and work within the community. Informal supports as opposed to formal supports. Again, informal supports include people that are expected to provide normal supports such as family and friends. Formal supports, however, refer to the supports within the community such as our therapies. Core supports support participants to complete activities of daily living and help them to work towards their goals and meet their objectives. I'll go into supports when it comes to budgeting later on. Short-term accommodation is the new terminology for respite. NDIS don't like the terminology of respite anymore, so they will always refer to it as short-term accommodation. Support connection, as opposed to support coordination, refers to short-term assistance to identify service providers and negotiate service agreements. Service bookings on the My Portal. A service booking is the way a participant engages with their chosen providers online via MyPlace. A service booking nominates the type of support, dates of support, and funding requirements to be allocated to a provider. A provider must request a service, and a document from the NDIS outlines the expectations of service provision for an individual from a service provider. This includes expectations around reporting back to the NDIA and to the individual or family. Again, this NDIS lingo document will be attached and available with the copy of the slides for people to refer to at a later date. Yeah, sure. I've just had a question asking about carers being paid. Was the question in reference to Centrelink or carers being paid as support? Okay, so when I referred to carers being paid as support, sometimes we have individuals who pre-NDIS plans have had their supports provided by auntie so-and-so or a friend that has come along and has opted out of the kindness of their heart. Say they met them at their local darts club and they come and pick them up because they're unable to drive. They take them to darts. They drive them around to the dart competition, things like that. That's a support that they are able to be paid for under the NDIS. As a support worker, you don't officially need qualifications to be able to provide those level of supports, and you can sign up with a service provider, or if they are self-managed or plan managed, the individual needs to obtain an ABN to work independently, and they can actually bill for their time in agreement with the individual that they're providing the services for. If you do need more information about your specific case that's relevant to you, you can contact your Synapse contact, or alternatively, if you have a support coordinator, contact them and ask them for further information about how you can go about that. Generally, family members that are deemed requiring to provide those supports, such as mum, or your partner, husband, wife of the individual, they are not deemed a suitable person to be paid because they're expected supports that would take place regardless of whether NDIS was in place. Does that answer the question? Yes. No problem. I can clarify further on if need be. One of the big ones is people understanding their support budgets. Once you've got your plan and your plan comes in place, it looks like a whole heap of words on a page with a whole heap of numbers. We often get the question of, how come I can't access money that's sitting in one budget and use it for other services in another? It's a really good question, and it causes a lot of frustration for individuals and family members. We don't always have that flexibility to transfer those funds from one pool of funds to the other. We wish we could too. There are 3 types of support budgets that might be in your NDIS plan. The core support budget I've summarised as things you do every day to help with your disability and help to achieve your goals. They help you, they help to achieve your goals, and goals are things that you want to happen. For example, getting a job, making new friends. The core support budget gives you the most control over your plan money and probably the most flexible budget that is provided. Core support budget has 4 supported areas to help you with your day-to-day activities. For example, a cleaner for your house if you can't clean it yourself. The second area is consumables, and consumables refers to supports you need every day. For example, continence items. The third one is funds to help you to be a part of the community. For example, a support worker to help you join in on community activities. And the fourth part is transport. For example, how you're going to access or arrive, travel to work, things like that. You can use money in the core support budget for all 4 support areas of your plan. For example, you get money in your core support budget to help with things you do every day, just such as get dressed. After you start to use the support for things you do every day, you might become more independent, which means that you require less help. You can now change how you use the money in your core supports budget, and you can choose to use less money on helping you get dressed and use more money to help somebody to help you to access a social or a sporting group. The core support budget gives you the most flexibility and control as to how you're going to spend that money. The second one is our capacity building supports budget. In summary, it helps you to be more independent and learn new skills to meet your goals. Capacity building supports, you can use this money to budget or to pay for support to help you to find a place to live, for example, to find a job, to meet and talk to other people, to be healthy. You might help to learn about what you want to eat, what nutritious meals are, and how to cook your own meals, learning at school or furthering your education, obtaining new skills. You can use money in the capacity building budget, support budgets, to pay for a support coordinator or a plan manager, but it needs to be added in at the beginning of your plan. You can choose to spend your capacity building supports budget on similar things if it's allowed in your plan. The third budget in our plan, in our support budgets, is the capital supports budget. This covers things that you generally buy once in a plan or not frequently to help support your disability, i.e. a wheelchair or car modifications. Capital supports could include things like technology to help you to talk to other people, equipment to help you in your house, or modifications to your car so that you can drive. You cannot choose to spend your capital supports budget on different things. It's an inflexible budget. Reviews. If you decide that your plan is not meeting your needs, you can get assistance to review your plan. You need to have good reason as to why you feel that that plan isn't meeting your needs. Again, just like applying for the NDIS, you need to have that supported with as much relevant information as possible. There is a form that you can complete. Again, if you need assistance with this and you feel that this is applicable to you, ask your Synapse contact person to help you through this process. We are fortunate that we have a wonderful advocacy service in Synapse to be able to help you through this, but it may not need that. It may just need somebody to help you to complete the form and establish what relevant evidence you might need to attach to that form. There are outcomes similar to setting up your plan in the first place. If you aren't happy with the outcome, you can go further. You need to request a review with a form, preferably in writing, or you can do it yourself independently without using the form and submit that to the NDIS. If you still aren't happy after requesting a review, you can have it reviewed additionally with the reviews tribunal process. What about carers? What about us? Often carers have to give up their jobs, their full-time roles, to become a carer to best support the individual, the person that we look after. There are 2 payments available for carers through Centrelink. I'm not going to go into it extensively because we are very fortunate that next session we will have staff members from Centrelink who will be able to contribute their professional advice on these sorts of things. There are 2 payments available for carers, however, through Centrelink. There's a carers payment and a carers allowance. In addition to this, there is a once a year payment of a carers supplement also. Carers payment provides financial help to people who are unable to work in substantial paid employment. It is a maximum of $827 a fortnight for a single person. This must be because they provide full-time daily care for either someone with a severe disability or medical condition who is frail and aged. Carers allowance, on the other hand, is an income supplement for parents or carers providing extra daily care and pays $129 a fortnight for either an adult or dependent child with a disability or medical condition, or again, someone who is frail aged. Carers allowance is a fortnightly payment. There is an annual income test, but no assets test. Carers allowance is not taxable, and we can be paid in addition to wages and any other income support payment. The third, as I mentioned, is a carer's supplement. It's an annual payment amount of $600. It helps with the cost of caring for a person with a disability or a medical condition. You can get carer's supplement if you're entitled to receive carer's payment or carer's allowance. Yeah. How can Synapse help you? We exist to help those that are impacted by a brain injury. Our lists of support are somewhat endless, and if you are struggling with putting a plan together, don't suffer in silence. It can be overwhelming, and we aren't expected as carers to be experts in everything that we do. Synapse can help you to prepare for your planning meeting with our NDIS pre-planning booklet. Synapse advocates can accompany you to your planning meeting as your advocate or support person. Synapse can also assist you with accessing services and supports through our Support Services Coordination Program. We can also help you to appeal a decision in regards to your NDIS plan through our appeals service from our advocacy team. We can help you link with your local community to access the services you or your loved one might require. We can assist you to, we can assist you to complete the application process for Centrelink, My Aged Care, ICare or NDIS. All of these services can start at the Family Liaison Officer's level when you're in hospital with your loved one is about to transition over to home. We can also do them in the community for all our families that are involved with Synapse. We can liaise with other organisations to help your family to communicate the impacts of brain injury. We have a wonderful advocacy services available to assist those impacted by brain injury in so many areas of their life. And again, we offer support coordination. We understand brain injury, so we can help carers to help their loved ones to access the right support. I've included a reference list for interest just in case we want to have access to where I got some of the information from for our presentation today. I have linked that with my presentation so that people can see it. You can also find the presentation on the Synapse website. I'll make sure that the NDIS lingo document is available for people to cross-reference. The presentation is also available on YouTube for family or friends that you might feel would benefit from it at a later date, or if you want to refresh your memory as to what we've covered today. And that's it, short and sweet, unfortunately. Gone through it quick with the questions. I have had a question emailed to me that came through, and I'll just read it back and then I'll give you my response. Is there any help in jumping hoops to become a registered provider and get paid for providing supported accommodation or foster caring that I provided for this worthy young man from 10 months old to 20 years old? He indicates every day that this is his home and will no way go to institutional care in a group home. But since NDIS came in, fostering money is gone, yet adult fostering for individuals with complex issues is wonderful but unpaid. I do not have time to get registered. The job of teaching and supporting is far too intensive. The second part of this question is that they've made contact with the NDIS regional team and have received a verbal okay to be a paid worker on this young man's home program. His speech therapist has put in writing that this person may be paid as a speech therapy assistant as they are qualified remedial language teacher. And then they've written, I need this okay to be in writing before higher up will pay me as a community integration worker. My response to this is, I do thank you for your question. Based on the limited information provided, my advice would be that we first of all, we need to know if this young man is plan managed, self-managed or NDIA managed. By the sounds of NDIS regional team's response, I will assume that he's NDIA managed. If he was plan or self-managed, you wouldn't need to become a registered NDIS provider. You would just need to have an ABN and relevant insurances. If he is NDIA managed and you are unable to provide the relevant documentation in writing to higher up to be paid as a speech therapy assistant, there might be an option that you could be paid as a support worker. You do not need to provide anything in this capacity, as it is not essential that you have certain qualifications to offer support work. The minimum qualifications are often set based on the individual requirements of the participant. Being paid as a support worker would mean that the funds would come from the core budget. Being paid as a speech therapy assistant may restrict you to being paid under capacity building budget, which may restrict depending on how much funding he has in this area of the plan, and therefore would need to be carefully used so as not to leave him short on his therapy's funding. I can't offer direct advice without seeing the plan, only some suggestions. If he has support coordination, I would suggest you speak with the support coordinator, as they have a copy of the plan and can advise you as to what capacity of funding he has. It does seem like a complex issue and a complex situation, and I'd suggest that you make contact with our advocacy team to be able to provide specific guidance, as they would be able to consider your circumstances as a holistic approach. Any other questions? Oh. Did you want to finish off? Did you need to finish off about next?
Thank you so much, Jemah. That was really informative. There is so much that we have to cover off when we're thinking, NDIS and My Aged Care, which is another completely different and complex scheme. So it's really helpful to have all of that information, and I guess this is another resource that you can go back to and find, watch again and find some more information. If you want to go back and watch, and if you didn't have the slides with you, you can download those slides. We're also going to make sure that we have that NDIS lingo sheet there for you as well. Jemah's just handed me the pre-planning booklet, so you can go onto our website and download the pre-planning booklet. We also have our plan review booklet. So those are there for you to download to help you out with your planning as well. I think it's really helpful also having Jemah with the understanding of brain injury, that unfortunately lots of services and including agencies out there don't necessarily have. So it's really good to have her brain injury perspective put on NDIS, because I think that can quite often be a missing piece for lots of people. If you have more questions that come up, you can continue to write comments under this, or also we have our Carers Facebook group, which you can join if you're not already a member of. Also, give us an email, give us a call at Synapse if any other questions have come up from watching this. And we also have our mailing list that you can get on, so you can hear about the upcoming events, get the links to the replays, and all sorts of other great resources that we're sending out in those. Next month, we will be continuing our series on navigating the system. So we will have Lisa Linden and Zoe Fisher, and they're going to be coming in and largely talking about Centrelink. We know that can be a really challenging space for people to head into, especially when they're already dealing with some of the challenges in regards to brain injury. So helping hopefully get a little bit clearer on what can happen there, and also some other community supports. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope that this was helpful. Again, keep asking us questions, get in contact, and we look forward to seeing you on Tuesday, the 4th of June. Thank you so much. Bye.